Welcome to An Awful World, but not awful like you think.
This is the show where we discuss whether we would have discovered important advances in a world exclusively full of Haylies and Libbys.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Haylie.
And I'm Libby. And today we're talking about theater. We had to say it dramatically so that you understood. We are the embodiment of the theater faces.
The face you just made, though. Yeah, I'm the dramatic one, and you're the comedy one.
Well, I'd like to think I'm both, but yeah, he just looks so whiny. Theater. Yes. Let's talk about the theater.
Do we have to talk like this the whole episode?
I was hoping we could. Because the theater started many, many years ago. Yeah, it's really old. everything we talk about in this podcast, yeah. I'm like, look, the first thing I have to say is it's really old. In case you guys didn't already know that. We have no idea really how old. We just think we have some sort of idea.
It's approximately hella old.
Yes, approximately hella years old. 2,500 at least, we think. My suspicion is that it's been happening for longer than that. We just didn't really know it, you know?
Yeah.
So the word theater is actually a word of Greek origin.
That makes sense.
And it was usually, so it really became a thing in Greek culture, which I feel like comes as no surprise.
No.
Because they were all about the arts and philosophy and all of that type of stuff. And there were typically 3 types of theatrical performance situations. Satire, dramedy, no, drama and tragedy. Dramedy together.
Dramedy.
Yeah. That's a drama comedy.
Yeah,
so
it is.
Drama, tragedy, and satire. No comedy.
Satire
in the Greek. Yeah, that is. You're right. That's
pretty much
satirical comedy. Yeah, that's true. You're right about that. So it was expanded considerably by the Romans, who started to take theater beyond just performing in a little amphitheater to street performances and dancers and comedies. Thanks, Romans.
Well, and they went from the amphitheaters to the enclosed theaters.
Yes.
The Colosseum.
Yes. Oh, boy, was that a theater.
Yeah.
That was a show.
Yeah.
And the stakes were people's lives.
That's true.
That's kind of scary.
That's true. They had acrobats too.
Yeah, they had all kinds of stuff.
And fighters and apparently people murdering animals.
That checks out for the Romans.
Yeah.
We forget that they were pagans. So, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of animal sacrifice and whatever. But anyway, beyond that, the Romans also, we do have to thank for musical accompaniment, because that was not a thing prior to the Romans, apparently. So what I'm saying, thank you, Romans, for Hamilton. I really appreciate that.
That's how we get the musical.
Really, really appreciate that, because I love Hamilton and I love musicals.
We quote Hamilton
weekly.
Several times weekly.
Honestly, on my way over here, I listened to 2 songs from Hamilton. That was just this morning. So it was obviously Washington on Your Side and Cabinet Battle number 1. Because I love the cabinet battles. Yes. They're my favorites. But anyway.
What's funny is I mentioned Hamilton at the end of my
do you? Yes. Do you? I can't wait to hear. So Romans have it. They do some stuff with it. Then comes the Renaissance, which again, very important for any kind of art.
Yes.
That's when it expands. That's why it's the Renaissance. And they really start to explore some complex things like human emotion and all kinds of things. This is when Shakespeare becomes popular during the Renaissance. And then by like the 17th and 18th centuries, we're getting more like satirical about like political issues. And these are like funny things that people want to see. Mm-hmm. And then basically into like modern theater. So there's a lot that happens in all of that time for it to develop into what it is. Yeah. And now we have film. And TV and
still theater.
It's still, yes. And we do still have theater and people go to the theater still. I went and saw a ballet last night.
Fun.
Yeah. And that's still just like, that's theater. Like it's still a thing that happens in 2025.
Yeah. And every time I go to New York, I have to go to Broadway.
Obviously, because why wouldn't you want to? Broadway is fantastic.
They're still making great shows.
Absolutely.
And they're still putting on the classics.
Yes.
One of the times, I think the first time Ty and I went to New York, we saw Macbeth.
Wow.
So they're still doing, things that are hella old.
Yeah, you're not supposed to say Macbeth in a theater, right? Did you know that?
I did know that.
You can talk about the character, but not the play. Mm-hmm. That's why in Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda's brain. That's why in Hamilton he says, I trust you'll understand the reference to another Scottish tragedy without my having to name the play.
Yeah, but then he says, they think me Macbeth.
Because character.
You can say the character.
Yes. Ambition is my folly. I'm a polymath, a pain in the ass, a massive pain.
Exactly. We know this too well.
Yeah, we really do. And Madison is Banquo, Jefferson's Macduff. Burnham Wood is Congress on its way to its name. All right, anyway. I could literally do several episodes where we just cite the entire...
Should this have just been named the Hamilton episode?
This is the episode where we talk about how the Romans created Hamilton.
And could we have created Hamilton? No,
absolutely not. My brain does not work like Lin-Manuel Miranda's does.
Also, we wouldn't have the same history of these terrible people to get to Hamilton.
No. Yeah.
So,
It would be Alexandria Hamilton.
That's right.
And Madison would be a woman named Madison.
And there probably would be no war.
Yeah, probably not.
They're
but
just
anyway.
like hanging out in New York. The greatest city in the world. Sorry.
Yeah, how dare you sing Hamilton to me like it's not something I do every day. It's just so relevant. But anyway. Yeah. So theater has obviously just like expanded a lot from its early days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think that in an awful world, we would have theater.
Absolutely, without question.
Yes. I think more than not, the Libbies would be the actors.
Probably.
And the Haylies would probably be like stagehands.
Well, I think you would do like a lot of production. I think you would be in charge of our costume designing.
I would love to do
our
costume
set designing. Yes, I think all of that stuff.
A lot of Haylies and Libbies would be in charge of like writing the plays.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We both excel at that.
Yes, but I think that a lot more Libbies would be actors than Haylies. I think you could get a couple Haylies on stage.
Yeah.
Maybe have some small parts.
I think so too.
But more than not, it's going to be Libbies out there for sure.
We are a dramatic people. And also, I always wanted to like be an actress.
And I've never, ever wanted that in my life. I don't like public speaking. I don't like being on a stage.
I don't really either. But there's also just something like, I don't know, like there's something cool, like when you perform something, like for me, it's mostly been like music, like playing guitar in front of other people and singing and like things like that. It's not necessarily the most comfortable thing at first, but then it's just like, this is really cool. These people are like listening to like me do this and I like that. But also we know that I am just like a fan of like a comedic joke. So, I would like to think that the Libbies could also like do stand up pretty well.
Yeah, probably.
But I don't know. But I definitely think obviously we're going to have theater in an awful world.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes hand in hand with our storytelling episode.
Yes.
We talk about that. We talk about stories. This is just stories coming to life.
Exactly.
So, and I think we'd absolutely want to do that. I had something and it was gone and now it's gone. It is gone. Not it was gone. It is gone. So maybe the Libbys wouldn't be great actresses if they can't remember their lines.
Nah, you'd be great. You'd be great. Because we don't really have lines right now. We're just chatting.
That's true. That's true.
You would be prepared for.
Yes, I would be hopefully quite prepared for. I have dreams about it often. I have had several dreams of me like performing every role in Hamilton.
That's
and being like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Like, yeah, that's happened to me a couple of times. It's not like a super recurring dream, but I've definitely dreamt about it a couple of times and then like forgetting the words or like realizing that I don't know the choreography or something like that. And then I'm like, well, fuck, there was more to this than I really thought there was.
It's that big turntable, you know, is really,
I know. It's really so cool though. What a cool idea.
I know.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Like, okay, so theater today, I think like in the 20th century, especially because film becomes a thing and then television becomes a thing in the 20th century, there was sort of a shift towards realism, like trying to make things look very real. What's interesting about a lot of theater is there's not a ton of emphasis on realism. And you think about something like Hamilton is so, I mean, the set truly is like pretty bare.
Yes.
You know, and they make it so good though, through all of these different, you know, whether they're walking uptown in New York City or they're at a party where they're meeting each other or he's getting off the ship from the Caribbean or whatever, like, you know, you really feel it just like through this crazy weird set that they have that isn't that like realistic looking, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something that this is something that I talk about a lot as someone who really likes to create, and my dad's a cartoonist and like has a lot of thoughts on art and things like that. Is when it comes to plays, when it comes to animated shows and movies and sets and things like that, I always think less realism is better. And here's my reasoning as to why. If you choose an artistic style, you make an artistic choice, and it is not set on, I'm trying to make this as realistic as possible, it ages so well. Yeah. Because you're like, wow, that is a beautiful artistry. Yeah. Rather than, wow, this aged poorly because now it's 50 years later and I can tell how unrealistic it truly looks.
Yeah, like the technology is bad.
Yes. So that's something I love about Hamilton and any other play where the scenes and sets are fairly bare. Right. Because you do have to use more of your imagination, and it is more of a stylistic choice that makes it so timeless. Yeah. Where you could have created that 40 years ago and you could have created it today, and you still have to use your imagination. And it's like the same thing, I think, when we watch like an old Disney movie like Snow White, where the backgrounds are all like watercolor painted and then drawn on top of it. And so you're just like, the depth it creates, you're just like, well, it's a cartoon, so the technology.
It's not just a cartoon.
That's true. It's the cartoon.
It's literally, it's regarded as the best cartoon of all time.
Yes, because it's the first full-length animated feature. But with that, it's like there's so many layers of different types of art. Yeah. And that makes it so seamless and timeless versus like the first Toy Story movie. Yeah. Where they're trying to make it as realistic as possible based on the technology that's available to them at the time. And I think that when you watch that one versus like the newer ones, you're like, wow, technology has come such a long way.
Yes, but also like I feel like that was a stylistic choice.
It was.
And it works for Toy Story.
It does. But like when you look at the humans, you're like, yikes. Because they're trying to make them, but that is as best as they could get at the time versus now.
Definitely Pixar is very into that sort of realism. Yes.
Yes. But it hits that way with like scenes from theaters as well. Right. And just like art in general. When you try to pick something that's so realistic based on the technology you have currently, it doesn't work as well when you try to come back to it. And then you're like, Yikes.
Yeah, it doesn't look super great.
Yes.
I think too, it depends on what it is.
Yes.
Right? Like, and like in classic film, a lot of the time. So like, think about, 1950s monster movies. I don't know if you've ever seen one, but one of the most popular ones is the Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Okay.
What they do, because they didn't have the technology to make something scary, is they play on what you can't see to make it seem scary, right? And that's a good stylistic choice, because if we don't have the technology, we're going to have to find another way to make the audience scared of what's what we're trying to achieve here is a scary film, and hey, here's how we're going to make it scary. But like something like, let's say, Jurassic Park, like, you have to see the dinosaurs to really get the full story and really feel like, oh, he's brought dinosaurs back to life and Like, I think it just depends on what it is. Yes. And like the Dune books, for example, I think those came out in like the 80s.
Something like
maybe.
that.
And they did do like a Dune movie in the 80s. And it was really bad. Because they didn't have the technology to do it.
Right.
Now you watch Dune and, oh my God, in 2024, when the second one came out last year, the landscapes are insanely well done.
Yeah.
Like you literally believe you're on another planet or that they're on another planet. You know what I mean? But like, it just depends on what it is, on whether you really need to play up that like unfamiliar landscape because we are supposed to be in a different galaxy on another planet or whatever, or not.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I agree that, I think that realism can make things look dated, but it just depends on, and in the last 15 years, our CGI technology has changed so much.
Yes. And it makes me wonder though, because I remember being a kid with like CGI films being like, wow, this looks so realistic.
This is amazing.
And now you watch it and you're like, yikes.
Yeah.
But so I wonder in 15, 20 years, are we going to look back on things like Dune and be like, yikes. You know?
I don't know.
Like, at what point is it truly, solidified in being so well done versus like, well, it was so good for its time.
I'd like to think that we're there with that kind of technology.
I would like to think that too, but I feel like I thought that back then. And,
it's just like Dune looks so good. Yeah. Like seeing it in the theater on a ginormous screen and it's just like, it looks real. It's crazy. And like, think about things like the Sphere, right? Yeah. Like that's a type of theatrical type performance. And that looks so fucking real. Yeah. It's crazy. Like you literally would believe wherever, you're supposed to be in this performance that you're there. It's nuts. And like virtual reality, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's all come so far. Yeah. But anyway, theater. We're going to have theater for sure because I think that we're big entertainment people. Yes. We love the entertainment.
And we want to be entertained.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's fun to both entertain and be entertained. Yes. And I think that that's going to be an important thing from the beginning. I think that probably, like I said, I think theater is probably older than we realize it is, but maybe not in like the similar way that we have it now. Or that we even had it, 2,000 years ago or 600 years ago or whatever. But I think it's like such a, like kind of like we were talking about in the libraries episode, it's like such a great way to escape and like not worry for a little while. Yes. Like if you're feeling down about something, it's like, oh, go to the movies and you watch a movie and you just get to pretend you're somewhere else for just a little while. And I think that's probably so important to like keeping humanity sane. Yeah. Just like, this is just to be entertained.
Yeah. Something that I think is really neat is that starting like with the Greeks and the beginning of theater as we know it with like the amphitheaters and stuff, they built amphitheaters just based on like being on a hill and like creating seating so that A, everyone can see, but B, natural acoustics. Yeah. Yes. So that everyone can hear and you don't need mics. Like
it's brilliant.
So smart.
Didn't have the technology, so we made it so that they could.
Right. Just like architecturally, And then the Romans were like, we could do this, but we could do it inside. Yes. And so I wonder if we could figure that out. And part of me thinks that maybe we could, in the way of like, when you talk and then you cup your hands, it's louder. And like, how people today are like, I mean, this is so modern, but like put your cell phone in a cup to make the sound louder. You know, like eventually you learn things that are just going to make things louder.
Yeah.
But so I wonder if we could figure out like the amphitheater style of it, because are we going to come up with microphones? Are we going to come up with that kind of technology?
You want to just address it here in this episode?
I want to say that the answer is no, but also that's something that will like, you know, we'll talk about other parts of why later.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, let me tell you this. As my major in college was really weird. It was about recording industry studies. I had to take an entire class on microphones and microphone theory. I am here to tell you, no. We could not figure that out because there's a whole thing of like, you know, like phantom power in microphones and preamps and all this stuff, like to even get certain microphones to work. And there's directional microphones, there's, you know, omni microphones or, you know, all these kinds of crazy different things to get this, you know, combination of metal and plastic to pick up our voices and put it into a computer and then send it out to the world is just really weird.
Yeah.
I don't feel confident, having studied it at length, that we could come up with it.
All right, that checks out.
Microphones. But I do feel confident about the acoustics. And I'll tell you, like, I think I talked about this on the podcast before, but I went to Chichen Itza, you know, in Mexico last summer. And they have an area where they would play a game, quote unquote game. I say quote unquote because it was like two prisoners doing it and whoever loses dies type thing. But they designed it so that like the, you know, public officials or whatever could sit at opposite ends of, you know, a field that's maybe 100 yards from each other, and they could talk pretty at a normal level to each other because of the way they designed the acoustics. So they had us all like stand on one side and like shout or like clap our hands and hear how well it like came back at us. It was really cool. So I'm like, if the Mayans, which I mean, that was an overstatement. I apologize, because the Mayans figured out a lot of things that I never could have. Yeah. But like they did that in the 1500s.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a little bit before that. The point is they figured it out with like not a lot of resources.
It's true.
I think we could do it.
Yeah.
And I think we could like understand, like you said, like, you know, when we put our, you know, our hands up to our face, that it directs the sound, you know, better. I think we could figure something out.
I think we could.
Yeah.
I think we could have amphitheaters for sure. And I think we could come up with a stage just so like people could see us.
Absolutely.
Now, something that I think is really interesting in history is especially like during the Shakespearean times, that theaters were all men. All the actors
so they
were
dressed
men.
Like women.
Yeah, so they just like had
roles.
younger men to play women.
Yep.
And even in romantic things. So fascinating that you can't be gay, but you can put on makeup, dress as a woman, and make out with another man on stage, but it's not drag.
It's all in the name of art.
And yes, and
Haylie.
it's all in the name of art, and it's not a big deal, and whatever. So I think that was a really fascinating part of history.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I mean, the same thing happened in especially early days of film with people of color. Yeah. It would be white people in blackface.
Yes, which is awful.
Yes. Sort of, you know, doing this.
The minstrel.
Yes. And this satirical, you know, perpetuating ideas about people of color that are not true.
And not funny.
Not funny at all.
I don't really understand why people thought it was a good idea or funny or...
You know, I don't know. A man came up with that, so I can't really understand
100%.
that. But yeah, I don't think that's going to be happening in Awful World.
I don't think so either.
I also just don't think that like our like worldview or like... I just don't think that's going to reflect in our theater like that. Like, I guess what I mean is like, it's taken so long for us basically into the 21st century to like, if there's a person in a film that is supposed to be, you know, an indigenous person from the Americas, we're going to hire a person to play the role that is actually a part of that community.
Yes.
To achieve that same result and also to like get representation for them.
Yes.
In this film that's supposed to be about that. You know what I mean?
Right.
That took us forever though. Even like Disney princesses, you know, we had Pocahontas, we had Mulan, we had all of that. The people that voice those characters are all white people.
Yes, they're all white.
So, you know, that's its own thing, but I don't think representation is going to be an issue in an awful world.
No. Now, one thing I will say is I could understand, let's say 1,000 years ago, and you were sent somewhere, you've explored somewhere, and you've come back and you've written a play. There is nobody like those kind of people.
That's different.
Yes. And you're going to say like, I went to this other country. And
I want to share this story with you.
Yes. You're going to be like, they were Tanner or, you know, but you're going to play it nicely.
Yes.
We would at least.
Yes.
I don't know that other people do or did, but so I can see that representation wise. But I also think that like, if we're talking about women and there are women nearby, we're going to choose a woman.
There's no chance that women are going to be excluded from theater in an awful world.
No.
I mean, that's just silly. It's silly that that was ever a thing.
Yes. I even have written down that like in the 1600s in Japan, there was kabuki theater and they had elaborate costumes and makeup and things like that. And originally both men and women were allowed in it. And then in 1629, women were banned and men still do these kabuki plays and
interesting
still carry the tradition of that. And I'm like, why are we still in any culture
doing that,
banning women from plays? I don't.
You know what's so interesting is like, okay, they banned women from these plays, but then also to be involved in any kind of theater today in 2025, if you're a man, some people are absolutely crucified for that.
Yes.
Because people think theater equals gay.
Yes.
Which is just inaccurate.
Correct. Some of them. Yeah.
Sure, but some of every group of people.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say.
And we don't associate any, other thing with being like that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't really know where this idea of where the shift was, I guess, because if you're telling me that, in Shakespearean times that it's all men playing the roles and it's a very esteemed, I don't know how esteemed it was. I guess I shouldn't say that, but it's it's a respectable enough thing of men are going to play these roles,
right,
to it changing to if you're involved in theater, you're it's
you're
not
gay.
masculine.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very strange to me.
There's a lot of stereotypes like that I don't understand. It's like how, women are supposed to be in the kitchen, but then it's such a cool thing to be a man who's a chef.
Yeah.
Because it's now you're being paid for it, so it's cool.
Right, yeah.
So
it's these interesting gender roles that perpetuate these ideas that are...
It doesn't check out.
No, it doesn't. It's so strange to me.
And that's math that doesn't add up and shouldn't be the way that it is. And so in an awful world, I just don't see it being that way.
No, for many reasons.
Yes, I think we would just be like, oh, you have a big personality and you like doing these kind of things and you're really good at it, so do it. And that's great.
And it's so not to bring up Hamilton again, but I'll always bring up Hamilton. I think there was a lot of backlash initially from really sensitive white people about, a black man portraying George Washington.
Yes.
Or a Hispanic man portraying, Lafayette or not Lafayette. I'm trying to think of John Lawrence. That's who I was trying to think of.
Oh, what's his name? That's what I wrote down as my last thing on here was blind casting.
Yeah.
That, and it's something that I think is so fascinating. And I think the people who are upset
about DEI. No.
Yes.
Okay.
But
go ahead.
They're the same people who are upset about blind casting for Hamilton.
Which is interesting because it's the same thing.
Yes, but they are the same people who are like, well, then what's wrong with blackface? You know, and it's like, it's different.
Because
it's different.
You are not, you know, Chris Jackson, who plays Washington. He's not putting white powder all over his face to perpetuate a white man.
And he's not making fun of him in any way.
Simply portraying a person.
Yes.
And he doesn't wear a wig. It's not like that. And that's what's so cool about Hamilton is like, that is, I want the people who are listening to hear me. That is a case of the person that is best for the job getting the job.
Yes.
Because that man, Chris Jackson, can sing so well. I am so obsessed with his voice.
It's so beautiful.
It's amazing, especially like in The Heights, he plays Benny.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go listen to that recorded version, it's phenomenal. So anyway, yeah, like it's the same thing. It's DEI is the same thing, but also like, I just need people to understand that white culture is everywhere and it is so like widespread and overarching. That is why like white people have been in a position to play those roles forever. So no, it isn't offensive for a black man to play the role of a white man.
No. And especially it's being used as an artistic choice.
Yes.
And B, it's one of those things specifically in the story of Hamilton. This is the story of America about the people who formed and shaped and fought for the country that we have currently, played by the people, the ancestors that look like what our country looks like today.
Yeah, and melting pot.
Yes. Back then, everybody was very, very white.
Yep.
Right now, where we live in the Midwest, most people are still very, very white. But as the country as a whole, built on people of different colors, races, genders, ethnicities, all of these things, we are a melting pot.
Yeah.
This country has been built on the backs of so many different people.
That's what it means to be American.
Yes. And so it's being portrayed by the people of America and what we look like today. And that is what it is saying.
Yes. And it's really cool.
Yes. And that is why it is different.
It's captivating.
Yes.
Like it really is. Like, no, I don't want to see an all white cast do Hamilton because I'll be honest, some of these white people cannot sing.
I know.
Okay. Not like Chris Jackson can. I mean,
who can, honestly?
I know. And I could go on and on about him and how beautiful his voice is and how much I love it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's an artistic choice. It's a statement.
Yes.
And I just, people that challenge that with the counter is just like, oh my God,
like, then you don't get it and it wasn't made for you and just shut up.
Right. And like thinking about, again, I don't mean to get, political in these things, but it's hard not to in this day and age.
Yes.
There has been an attempt by the current administration to, wipe a lot of things, what quote unquote DEI from our National Archives. Some of that is the Tuskegee Airmen, who were black men who operated planes for the United States military during World War II. What's important to understand is that black people, people of color in 1945 were not widely accepted in American culture.
No.
There was segregation. There was, all kinds of bullshit going on with that. And they served this country still because they believed in something. And if that isn't the most touching, amazing piece of history, I don't know what is. Because to be able to serve a country that it's your country, but like,
but they're not serving you.
Right.
But you're serving your community.
And that you would be willing to lay down your life because you believe in this.
And you think that it's going to be better for the people who come after you. That
really says something. And so I just want people to think about that too. You know, when you're thinking of these roles of, you know, white people and people of color and all of this stuff, like that's just, it's just history. Like there's so much of history. Again, history is written by the victors. So like it is very, very whitewashed, but there is so much that went on in all of these other communities that we don't know about. And that just kind of to bring it back around, like we know about some of these stories because of media and because of theater now.
Yes.
I think of something like Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah.
That story, I had no idea about that story. It's one of the most fantastical, you know, amazing, interesting stories to come out of the United States. And I had no idea about it until I read the book because the movie was coming out. I wanted to read the book before I saw the movie. And like, my God, what a story. And so like giving exposure to those sorts of stories is really, really cool. That's something that theater and the entertainment industry has, you know, done for us.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. I just think that in a world full of Haylies and Libbys, that we would be very mindful of those things about what's making a statement. What should we do blind casting versus should we be using people who are from that country or that whatever, if it's women or a minority or whatever, you know, and all of those things, representation, I think we would be very mindful of those things straight from the beginning. But I also don't think that we would have situations where people would feel like minorities from the beginning.
No,
our stories would be so different.
Yeah, I surely hope not.
Yeah.
I agree with you that I don't think that it would be like that from the beginning. And the whole like thing with race is it's about power and we're not like particularly power hungry people who like care more about power than we do care about other people. So I don't think that there's going to be fine lines between people of different races or classes or, you know, all of this stuff. Like, I think there's so many problems that don't arise in our ideological, you know, an awful world. I'd like to think, hopefully, that it wouldn't be like that. But that is certainly something I'm so grateful, like, that media and theater have done for us.
Yes.
To, like, give us those stories that we didn't necessarily have access to.
Yes.
And I agree that I think we would make every attempt to, like, if we're telling a story, an amazing story about a woman in Japan who disguised herself, you know, whatever, like Mulan.
Right.
Then, we're going to make
China, it's fine.
Oh, it was China. Whoops.
She saves all of China.
The Huns.
Casual.
It's fine. It's just like my brain is just swirling with a lot of information. And then I forgot Mulan. It is China. Anyway, it's because Brian is playing a game right now where he's in Japan. It's really throwing me off. Anyway, that we would make every attempt to like find a person that is actually Chinese to help tell that story.
And if it was like, oh, well, we don't live anywhere near China and we're not that great with exploration and boats. So there's no one around who's from China. We would be like, who looks like they could fit that part the most? Not who can we make up and make fun of.
Yeah, like appropriate.
Like, who could just portray this role the best?
Yeah, definitely.
Know, kind of a thing.
Definitely.
Now, I just read this book earlier this year, and it was fantastic. The Jodi Picoult book, By Any Other Name. And it's specifically about how William Shakespeare may not have written his own plays. And how this woman, she actually wrote the majority of his plays, all his best-selling plays, at least. And because women couldn't be a part of that and things like that. And I just kind of want to shout out the book because it's fantastic and I do think you should read it.
Yeah.
But also, I just think it's another thing that's so fascinating about the history of theater is that, again, certain people, even though their perspectives are really important, that they were not allowed.
They were not welcome.
They were not welcome. They were not allowed to write. They weren't allowed to have these opinions and things like that. And again, I just think that in a world full of Haylies and Libbies, that wouldn't be the way, because anything that we would find fascinating, we would be like, yes, go share it.
Because think about some of, the greatest content, the greatest stories created by women. And like, I'm thinking of like 19th century, like Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein.
Yes.
She wrote it under a pen name because she knew that if men, like if someone believed a man wrote it, that they would buy it. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like to feel like you have to write under a fake name to get this story out there.
Like J.K. Rowling used her initials.
Because it's ambiguous.
Yes.
You can't tell.
And, she's become problematic for
other reasons that we don't need to go into.
Yes. But it's sad that was in the 90s.
Right.
That wasn't that long ago.
Right.
And women are still doing things like that.
Yeah. I think that speaks a lot to our just like inherent biases. And, I'd have to explore more like what really creates that. Because like we have them, we have to acknowledge that. I think a lot of people want to be like, I'm not biased. And it's like, the fact is,
Everybody
actually that you are.
Yes,
yeah,
but
everybody
you have
is.
to recognize it and check it.
Yeah,
and
it's not, nobody's like trying to shame you for being biased inherently. That's just
that's being a human.
Yeah, and being in touch and being aware of that is really important.
Yes.
And I, for me, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but like obviously like we grew up in the age of 9/11.
Yes.
So after 9/11 happened, I can remember distinctly being afraid of Muslim people for nothing other than the people that perpetrated the attacks were Muslim.
Yes.
But that's not
about all Muslims.
No, it's not.
A handful of people.
But like I had to check myself a lot of times, especially being on planes.
Yes.
If I would see someone, that looks maybe Middle Eastern or whatever, and then I would feel a little scared, and then I'd be like, well, hold on.
Yeah, like they're not that person.
That's my bias.
Yes.
And I have to acknowledge that and then remind myself that that's not true and then move on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
well, and it's something like I still do today. There are people in this world who I genuinely disagree with the things that they do.
Yeah.
But then I can still step back and be like, well, okay, well, they did this one good thing, and to their credit, they've done this one good thing. And sometimes, even there are people where I'm like, well, sometimes I have to stop and think they're never going to win with me because
they're not me.
Because I just inherently don't like them.
Yeah.
So
it's important that you recognize that.
Yes. And I'm like, they're never going to win straight off the bat. They can come in and they cough and I'm like, I can't fucking stand them.
Yes.
Kind of a thing, because I don't like them. And so now they have made a noise and I don't like it.
Yes.
And so then I have to be like, well, to their credit, they're here.
Yeah.
To their credit, they're doing this thing.
You do have to remind yourself.
Yes.
Like, that's just my bias.
Yes.
I can't be unfair about everything with this person because it isn't fair. And I recognize that.
Exactly.
And that's how you improve as a human being.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway. All of this is to say that, I would like to believe, I'd have to look more into it. I don't know, where our bias stems from, just like as a humanity. I have no idea. I'd like to look into that. Actually, it sounds really interesting. But I'd like to think that we wouldn't have it in an awful world.
Yes, which we definitely would. But I think we would be so much better about checking them.
Because as you said, to be biased is to be human, Yes.
And it's just like, there's always going to be people that you just don't like. There are going to be Haylies and Libbies that are different and that we just don't like them one-on-one.
Right.
But as a group, I don't think we would, because
we're not going to make broad generalizations about people. Yeah.
Because you would just be like, oh, well, this person.
It's this person. It's not all people like this person.
Exactly.
Like that look like this person or whatever, whatever it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway. Well,
that had nothing to do with theater.
But it kind of did.
But it kind of does.
It kind of did. Because
there's a lot of stuff in the history of theater.
Only maybe for the last couple hundred years have generously a couple hundred years have certain races of people or, women have access to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an important conversation to have about representation. I think that was really fun.
Yes.
It was a fun conversation.
And again, shout out to the book by Any Other Name, because it talks about people from the Shakespearean time plus the people from today, and how one is a woman who's a playwright and one is like a Black gay man who's a playwright, and how they are having trouble getting their stories out there into the theater world, because it's still kind of a white man's world in theater today. Surprise.
What?
I know.
This is something I'm hearing for the first time. Yes.
I know.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think that accessibility to theater and performance in an awful world would be broad. I was just thinking about this last night, at the ballet, and like, I think there were maybe like 3 ballerinas that were people of color. And I was just thinking about how it's not a very accessible, type of performance art, even in 2025, for certain groups of people, but that I'm encouraged, probably 15 or 20 years ago, there may not even have been a single person of color up on that stage. I don't know how much ballet has changed, but it's encouraging. We still have a long way to go.
Yes.
But yeah, it is encouraging.
Yeah.
So
I'd like to think that in an awful world, like costumes and sets would just be like, fantastic.
The sequins, baby.
Oh yeah. Glitter everywhere. Everything would shine.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Make the whole place shimmer.
Shing.
That's her ring, by the way.
Shing.
But I like to think that the stories would be very diverse.
Yeah.
And just, I think that we'd
be so much more open-minded.
Yeah. Just so much cooler.
Yeah. We'd be so informed.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'd be really cultured. Yes. That's what we'd be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try to be cultured, but it doesn't always work.
No.
I am still just, who I am at the end of the day. So I try, but
Yeah. But as long as we're growing.
That's right. That's what it's all about.
Exactly.
Try to be a better person every day. Well, do you have anything else to say about theater?
I don't think
We've said a lot about theater and not about theater.
Yeah.
But I think it was all relevant. It was all important. And I really enjoyed it.
And now I think I'm going to go watch Hamilton.
I love that energy for you. It's going to be like a stormy afternoon.
Yeah.
So I just curl up and just sing Hamilton.
That's right.
Yeah. A lot of people won't watch it with me because I will not be quiet during the whole I will perform the whole thing myself.
Oh, yeah. Same. That's why I just watch it with Ty.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just sing it really, really loudly.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, thanks for joining us for this fun conversation about theater. Check out our storytelling episode too, because that kind of relates back to this.
Yes.
It's just like a fun, different way of storytelling. Check us out on, wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. You can get us all those places. If you'd like to throw us some cashola over at the Patreon, we'd sure love to have you as a patron. Patron? My brain. This is what Patreon does to me. Patron. Anyway, if you'd like to be a patron, hop on over there. It's patreon.com/anawfulworldpodcast. And we will see you next time. Until then, we hope your day is simply awful.
Wow.